Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're tackling a massive challenge that so many companies are wrestling with right now. How do you take Kubernetes from a cool, successful side project and turn it into a real enterprise-wide competitive advantage? We're going to use a fantastic guide from Baytech Consulting as our map to navigate not just the tech hurdles, but the business strategy you need to actually win. So let's just start with how big of a deal this really is. So, to set the stage, just look at this number. The Kubernetes market is on track to be worth almost $10 billion by 2031. I mean, that's huge. It's proof that it has become the absolute standard for running modern apps. But this incredible success story has a dark side. And this right here is the core question we're digging into. What happens when the very flexibility that made you love Kubernetes in the first place starts to become your biggest enemy? When your success actually starts to create bigger, nastier problems down the line. This leads us to a concept that the source calls the Kubernetes scaling paradox. This is that tipping point, that moment when all your organic growth, without a real strategy behind it, starts to make your complexity, your costs, and your risks just explode. Yeah, see? This is what's so tricky. That initial freedom you had, it can accidentally create what the guide perfectly calls a house of cards. Your teams get so terrified of touching anything, so scared that one little change will bring the whole thing crashing down, that they just stop. They avoid critical updates, they stop innovating, and that's how your early wins quietly turn into this massive, scary operational burden. So to make this paradox feel a little more real, the guide gives us this amazing metaphor, the four horsemen of Kubernetes sprawl. Now, these aren't four separate problems you can fix one by one. No, they're all connected, feeding each other in this vicious cycle that just eats away at the value of your platform. Let's meet the first horseman. All right, first up is the one that gets everybody's attention, from the engineers all the way up to the CFO, cost. We're talking about those cloud bills that just seem to go up and up no matter what you do. In fact, a recent CNCF survey found that a whopping 68% of companies are watching their Kubernetes costs climb. And this chart just puts it in brutal perspective. On average, teams are literally throwing away almost a third of their entire cloud budget. Think about that. That is not a rounding error. That is serious capital that could be going into new products or hiring, just vanishing into thin air on things like over-provisioned resources and zombie clusters. So why are costs so high? Well, that brings us to horseman number 2, complexity. As your environment grows, you get this pile-up of undocumented quick fixes and one-off solutions. And boom, there's your house of cards. Nobody really knows how it all works anymore. And this gets exponentially worse when you're trying to manage hybrid or multi-cloud setups. And that complexity leads us straight to our third horseman, security. Now here's the crazy part. Most security breaches in Kubernetes aren't some super sophisticated hack. Nope. They're usually because of simple, preventable mistakes, misconfigurations, or, and this is the big one, just failing to patch things. That complexity we just talked about creates this upgrade paralysis, this fear of changing anything, which leaves the door wide open for attackers. And the final horseman that ties this all together is drift. You know exactly what this is. It's when someone logs in to make a quick manual fix instead of going through the proper process. Every time that happens, you create a unique snowflake server. It totally destroys the whole point of having predictable, automated infrastructure and makes any future upgrade an absolute nightmare. So here's the main takeaway. These four horsemen, they're not just tech problems for the IT team to worry about. They create a real vicious cycle that hits the business hard. Complexity creates security holes, which makes teams over-provision resources just to be safe, which makes costs skyrocket. And all of that just grinds innovation and your developer velocity to a screeching halt. Okay, so that's the problem. And yeah, it sounds pretty daunting. But here is the good news. It is absolutely solvable. The secret is to stop being reactive and start being proactive by really, truly mastering 3 core disciplines. This is how you take back control. First up, autoscaling. But it's not as simple as flipping a switch. You need to think in layers. As you see here, you've got the horizontal pod autoscaler, or HPA, which scales out by adding more copies of your app. Then you have the vertical pod autoscaler, or VPA, which scales up by giving your existing apps more power. They're both crucial. But, and this is the part people miss, they are useless without node-level autoscalers like Cluster Autoscaler or Carpenter. I mean, without that, your pods have literally nowhere to go. Okay, Discipline number 2 is all about resource management, but you should really think of it as financial discipline. Getting your resource request and limits dialed in is the single best way to slash those cloud bills. But look at all the ways it can go wrong. It is a constant balancing act. If you over-provision, you're just burning money. But if you under-provision, your apps could slow to a crawl or even crash. Getting this right is a continuous process.
And of course, none of this works if you're flying blind. You can't scale what you can't see. That's where our third discipline, observability, comes in. It's all built on these 3 pillars. You've got metrics from tools like Prometheus, which give you the hard numbers. You have logs for digging into what actually happened. And you have traces with tools like OpenTelemetry that let you follow one single request across your entire system. At scale, this isn't a nice to have, it's non-negotiable.
All right, so with those fundamentals in place, now we can talk about the big one. The huge strategic decision every company has to make, choosing an enterprise platform to manage all this madness. The guide focuses on the 3 big players in the market: Rancher, OpenShift, and Tanzu. Now, what I love about this comparison is that it's not about a laundry list of features. It's about their core philosophy, their DNA. Think of SUSE Rancher as the champion of flexibility and openness. It can manage any Kubernetes cluster anywhere. Red Hat OpenShift is more like the secure, all-inclusive resort. Everything is built in, consistent, and supported. And VMware Tanzu is the absolute powerhouse for organizations already deep in the vSphere world. The key thing to notice here is the trade-off, especially around vendor lock-in, which is very different for each one. Okay, that was a lot of information. The problems, the foundational solutions, the big platforms. So how do you actually use all this to decide what to do next? Let's boil it down into a clear, actionable plan. The guide offers this brilliant, simple framework. Instead of getting lost in spreadsheets, just answer these 3 questions. First, what do you already have? Your existing tech might pull you strongly toward one solution. Second, what do you care about most? Is it flexibility, security, or consistency? That will point you in the right direction. And finally, be honest about your team's skills. That'll tell you if you're ready to build your own path or if you need more of an all-in-one solution. And this is so important. The platform is just one piece of the puzzle. Real long-term success comes from building what's called a center of excellence. That means you have to invest in your people with training. You have to lock down your processes with things like GitOps to kill that configuration drift. And then you pick the technology that supports all of that. People, process, then technology. And that brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. As you go back to your teams, you have to ask this one critical question. Are you deliberately, strategically building a platform that makes your business faster and stronger? Or are you, maybe without realizing it, just building a fragile house of cards that's doomed to collapse? The choice is yours, and hopefully this gives you the framework to make the right one.